series, we're growing a Robinhood account from $0 all the way to 1 million. And I'm showing you every step of the way how I get there. So a lot is going on in the market today. We did add some new positions. We're both short SPY and Apple. We started buying the dip on Tesla at some point earlier in the day, and then we did spread out of that position. We did take some risk off of Tesla just because there's a lot going on with the trade war, tariffs. What is Trump going to do tonight at his joint address? But I did add some more into NEO and Grab. We are still bullish on those long term. But let's just talk a bit about what's going on right now in the market. So today, Trump is going to deliver his joint address to Congress at 9:10 p.m. So that's about an hour and a half from the time I'm filming this video. If he's continued to stay strong on his tariffs and trade war, then the market is going to sell on that news. If he's dovish and kind of walks it back, then of course the market's going to rally. So the futures, as we trade tonight, the market is going to be looking to that address. And then looking ahead, we do have Jerome Powell. The FOMC meeting is on the 19th. That's 2 Wednesdays from now. So we'll get a better idea of what the future holds for any potential rate cuts. And then in March, we do have quad witching. That's just a bunch of different products that are all expiring on the third Friday of the quarter. So all those quarterly expiration will happen on March 21st. And then we do have VIX expiring on the 17th, and we have U.S. equities future roll on the 17th as well. Now, something really interesting that has happened recently is the Federal Reserve has a GDP estimate called GDP Now for Q1 of 2025. The blue chip consensus was over 2%. The Fed was also originally forecasting positive 2.7%, but now they've revised that much lower to not only negative 1.5%, and then just recently they lowered it all the way to negative 2.8%. That is really just saying that we could have a Q1 with negative GDP growth, and then if we had another negative quarter of GDP growth in Q2, we could technically be in a U.S. recession by the end of June. So that's really bearish, for the overall economy. You have Trump, who is starting to, cut government spending with Elon's Doge. That's all bearish because that's people who are getting laid off or taking the severance package. They're going to go into unemployment. Unemployment is on Friday. Jerome Powell is also speaking on Friday. So there's a lot on the calendar that can move the market. But let's just get into the price action because I can give you an idea of what to expect here and what levels to play and where you can make a good amount of money. Let's just dissect what happened today. So if we go here to regular trading hours, you can see that we did have a gap down, right? So we did close here around 584 yesterday. And then we formed this gap as we opened around 579. And then we did drift lower to 576 and 572. Those were the support levels I was looking at. We eventually did hold this 573 level. And then we did bounce. Once we broke over this, that was pretty bullish. And then we continued higher. We rejected off that gap. And then we pushed back and we actually filled the gap. And once we actually broke above that trend line, so you can see here, this was like the uptrend on SPY. So you have multiple reactions. Once we started sneaking back over that trend line, that was really a pretty nasty bull trap, right? I was even buying Tesla calls. And if you look at Tesla, Tesla's at that same, relative level. It's come down over 47% from all-time highs, and it's starting to bounce from that level. So I was buying Tesla calls, like thinking, okay, maybe SPY is forming a bottom. Tesla is going to be a good stock to play when the market does bottom. But then we had that really nasty pullback, and that was really just a rejection, right? So whenever you have a breakdown of a trend line, price likes to come back up, retest that level, and if it rejects that level, it is acting as resistance, and then we will continue the downtrend. And so that close really forced me into buying SPY puts as well as Apple puts and thinking that this is going to head lower. Same thing with tech. You can see that we did break above this like previous trend line, and then we actually closed down below the breakdown point on QQQ as well. So really bearish price action, but you can see after hours, there was some news that maybe Trump is going to compromise on tariffs and he's going to walk them back tomorrow. And then the market rallied a bit after hours. But like I said, it's really just going to depend on that joint address tonight and then what comes out tomorrow. But I think we'll know more tonight if there's going to be a gap down tomorrow or if there's going to be a gap up. If there's a gap down, which I think there will be, I mean, Trump kind of has an ego. He wants to uphold his reputation, show his strong front. I think he's going to be kind of vicious in this talk. We'll see. But if that does happen, then we are going to probably gap down. And the levels I'd be looking at is really this like sneaky trend line on SPY, right? So if we come back down here, there's like a moving target. We could hit around this like 569 level, and that could act as support. But if volatility is really high, maybe we even gap down below this level, I'd be looking at 566 and 560, 561. What I'm really looking for, though, is a capitulation selling event, right? So usually there'll be a selling event that marks a bottom, or at least a local bottom, and then we'll have a few days of a relief rally, which would be like a dead cat bounce. And the way that I would identify that is by looking at Lowry's up-down volume, right? So you can see here today it was 58% down volume. If you go into TradingView indicators, you can type in Lowry, up-down, add that to your chart. Then you can see it down here throughout the day. But earlier in the day, it was around like 80%. What you'd want to see is down volume that's greater than 90%. And then you'd also want to see VIX, which has broken out. You'd want to see VIX probably like at or above 30. So if all those things are happening and then SPY's also at support, then you can play some SPY calls for like the end of the week or next week. You could even short UVXY. I like to buy puts on UVXY a week or two out. And then, there's probably going to be somewhat of a relief bounce. Maybe we can drift all the way back up to 584 and test that level again. But it really just depends on the narrative of what's going on with trade. And then obviously Friday with unemployment, things could really shift around, but we're trying to be as flexible as possible. And then you could also take a look at Tesla, right? So if Tesla, it is holding this trend line. It could certainly break below, but usually a reaction of 4 reactions on this trend line. You can see it already held support here. My hope is that it can at least have somewhat of a dead cat bounce from this level. And not sure why I have all these percentages here, but you can see that this downtrend, it might come back up and test that level at like 327 and then reject there. This 276 level is kind of like that flip point. If it can hold above 276, it does have a good shot at pushing to this candle here at like 299, 300, and then even potentially back up to that 326 level, or even right to like this 311 level. So like my targets are like in that 300 to 326 level over a short period of time, sometime in March most likely, if we do have a strong bounce on the market, or if we even do have a selling capitulation event. This will probably push down lower to like 242. That level is a gap that was formed previously that has not been filled, and that level will act as strong support. So we have 2 gaps here. This is the first gap. This might hold. If not, it's going to come back down to this 220 to 243, 245 level. But like I said, it's not going to stay down there for long because it's already sold off so much that there's going to be somewhat of a short covering rally, and then you'll have people piling into it. Since this is like a social media darling, a lot of people are going to be buying call options here. And then Apple, this one actually closed right on that trend line. I did buy some puts for this week and for next week. Hopefully this can break down and continue lower. It's held on a bit stronger because all the other Mag 7 stocks have been selling off. If you look at Mags, you can see that it did kind of have the same setup here as well, where it did fill the gap. It bounced, and then it kind of rejected and then closed back under $50, $49. So yeah, right now, market is very concentrated into the Mag 7 stocks, and that's just like Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, AVGO, Tesla, like all those big stocks, those are very concentrated. But, I think that's probably not a good place for you to be buying long term right now, because those stocks are just so concentrated. They're exposed to the overall market. If tech is selling, then those are going to sell as well. But like I said, on a strong bounce, those are the ones that you probably want to play because they're going to absorb the most flow from the market. So I threw a lot at you today. Really just watch the Trump thing tonight. Obviously, Bitcoin is like at that 89K resistance level. It might fall to the 73, 74K level. So I'm still looking at that as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens with crypto. And then, same thing with like Ethereum. Just like all of these have been like a retest and then rejection as well. But obviously we had the crypto summit on Friday. We'll see what happens with Trump and Eric Trump trying to pump and dump this thing for like the 100th time. Maybe they'll like remove capital gains tax. Who knows what could happen? I do think that, Bitcoin could still pop to the upside and then go for new highs. But a lot of that is still just dependent on tariffs and the trade war, because everything moves like an ocean in this market. So thanks for watching. If you've made it to the end, please like and subscribe. It really motivates me to put out more videos. But if not, just drop any comments, join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Peace.